So, about Cyberpunk 2077.
Please welcome Keanu Reeves.
Ugh. Hey, Cyberpunk. I have beef. Let's hash this out. So, I've not got this game at launch. I wanted to wait to make a video or anything like that until this game was patched to death and fixed somewhat. So, while I'll say that it is still a buggy mess, and playing through it while also trying to finish most of the gigs and all the side jobs is a slog as a result, I will give them credit for it being a lot better than it was. I was pretty irritated at the fact that the game likes to fully crash on me a lot, and I know it's the game's fault because it's the only thing that ever crashes on me, ever. So I would frequently lose a bunch of progress if the game didn't save for a while, and I didn't expect to crash, and I also didn't save manually myself, and then boom. Super awful. This game had so much potential, but it was not only let down by all the development issues, but also the general decision making that seems to be plaguing it as well. Now, I'll be honest here, I had trouble getting footage that I would consider interesting. It's not that the game isn't interesting enough to play, I guess, but if you're watching someone else play it, any given moment of the game isn't too interesting to watch, sadly. Also, the general aesthetic of the game is actually quite samey, and I was kind of over it quite quickly, and the novelty of a fictional 2077 future wore off really quickly for me as well. As one could probably guess, my favorite parts of the game were listening to Keanu's views of the world via all the Silverhand dialogue throughout the game, and if they used a regular guy in this role instead of a big-time celebrity actor, I have no idea how this would impact the game at large. That would be interesting though. Anyways, my general thoughts aside, let's move on to the gameplay. I'll start in a weird spot with the driving. So, no matter what car you drive, it controls like absolute trash. It's not so much that one specific vehicle controls better than another, but rather it's more like tiers of vehicles that can actually be grouped together, and all vehicles in that tier control exactly the same, if that makes sense. So all cars that are shaped like a Lego block, for instance, and have no aerodynamicness to them whatsoever, all control the same as each other, even if they're completely different vehicles. Same as if you have an exotic car or maybe a motorbike, Bugatti type vehicle. My point is they all control real bad. I also hate how the draw distance of the map, specifically when driving, is. The Witcher had this problem too, but it wasn't really nearly as egregious, especially since you can have Roach auto run on the roads. Anyways, I'll be driving like a madman, obviously, trying to get from point A to point B as fast as I can. I'll be on a straightaway, then boom. Oh, suddenly you missed a turn, and now I'm careening into a building. I probably just killed somebody. I passed the turn I was supposed to make. My car is all messed up, and all of this could have been avoided if they would have just pulled the minimap back a little bit as the turn was approaching. Garbage. Now, as far as the story of this game goes, it's well written enough, I suppose. I'm not going down the rabbit hole of the glitches and issues here, just the stuff that I'm pretty sure CDPR intended for the player to experience. I won't lie, Keanu makes the whole story too, including the side mission stuff. He isn't included in every side mission, but seeing him suddenly pop up and talk about stuff was, I don't know, reassuring, maybe? Like, I wasn't doing all this crap alone or something. I don't know. Anyways, the English voice cast is solid, and nobody really does a bad job, especially main characters who they want to shine any sort of light or attention on, like Rogue or Panam. Everyone seems to deliver their lines like they're actually there. That's appreciated in any game, but especially one with this game's reputation. It starts in different ways depending on if you select Street Kid, Corpo, or Nomad as your pre-gameplay life path, but I chose Street Kid. That makes the most sense. So if you choose that one anyways, your character will be chilling at a bar, for example, talking to a very minor bit character that you may never see again if you're not into side questing, and the guy has nothing to do with anything, and really all that happens is that he puts you in needless debt that you never really have to pay if you don't want to. Anyways, blah blah blah, skip ahead a bit, and V and his or her best friend Jackie, who seem to be enemies when they first are introduced to each other and stuff, they when everything kicks off, Skip to the part where they steal the game's primary MacGuffin, a piece of technology that has the personality engram of Keanu Reeves on it. Jackie uses it first during the escape sequence, but, spoiler alert, I guess he dies too quick before he starts becoming Keanu, so then when your character uses it, then that's your problem now? I don't know. You can choose to hate him the whole game, or you can let him quote-unquote grow on you. That's up to you. You spend the rest of the game, assuming you don't do side quests at all, trying to separate yourself from Keanu so that he doesn't become you and you die. That's the long and short of it. It's not bad, and you can certainly think of something worse than that for driving a main story, in my opinion, but my opinion is a less than professional one at best, so moving on. I digressed pretty hard after saying, let's talk about gameplay, then only said I hate driving in this game, and while that is true, that's only about a third of what this game wants you to do all the time. The combat's pretty good, all things considered, so that's what we'll talk about next. This isn't the kind of game where you straight up have superpowers or anything, but they did incorporate 3 primary elements into the way that you handle folks in this game. The first and most obvious is the guns. The expected suite of firearms makes an appearance in this game, save for traditional rocket launchers. So we have handguns, SMGs, rifles, shotguns, snipers, etc. There's a Ripper Dock attachment that you could turn your arm into a rocket launcher, but even when upgraded to Legendary, you would be surprised how insanely weak a rocket-propelled grenade launched directly at your face can be. So, I don't use it. Anyhow, you can find weapons that are in different classes, such as Iconic or Legendary, and that's supposed to make it more powerful, but it really seems to scale with how strong your character was when you found it, because early game Legendary weapons are outclassed by some endgame common weapons. This is what I meant when I said that the game was let down by development decisions. Some Legendary weapons are fun and powerful, mainly due to having so many effects built straight in, right out of the box, like Divided We Stand, for example, which is a very powerful gun that homes in on up to 5 enemies at once and deals heavy poison and thermal damage. Yeah, that's about as cool as it sounds. That's just phenomenal. But other Legendary weapons fall right back into that bad decision making that people hate about this game, such as Skippy, for example. A sentient gun that you can find pretty early on, also it may not be Legendary in class, but whatever, same difference, that asks if you want it to auto-aim at the legs for non-lethal shots or auto-headshots for extremely potent, powerful damage amounts. But CDPR is at it again when Skippy forces you to switch permanently to whatever option you didn't initially choose after 50 kills. This is unavoidable and irreversible and pissed me off so much. You don't even understand. I don't know why they go out of their way to make the game less fun on purpose. You're never warned of this at any point, so your whole strategy and upgrade resources could be wasted on this gun if you didn't already know this going in ahead of time. And I didn't. So yeah, garbage. The second primary combat element is melee attacks. CDPR said that one of the biggest reasons the game was delayed was to polish up the first-person melee combat and make it more fun and feasible to want to use, so that we don't have another like Skyrim situation. I give it about a 6 out of 10 though, for a couple reasons. It's clearly polished to some degree, as when you enter melee combat, your character auto-locks on to the intended target so you don't lose them off screen so easily, and depending on the weapon you use compared to the strength of the enemy you're facing, they usually flinch appropriately. That said, they still just jump out of your field of view randomly sometimes, and with no peripheral vision, you can get punished, especially when outnumbered. The gorilla arms, mantis blades, and monowire are fun enough on their own, but it is just flat out unwise to build your whole character around them because the melee combat is still a bit jank and not particularly reliable. You would have to try it for yourself though to really get a better idea of why I feel the way I do about it, so moving on. Lastly, you have the third and final combat element for this game, and the closest that things will get to magic as you'll find in it. That would be hacking. You see, hacking isn't very useful to begin with at the beginning because your operating system blows and the available hacks also suck. Not to mention your character doesn't have the RAM, which is kind of like a magic gauge if you want to look at it that way, available at the beginning of the game in order to make it a key part of your combat. The most useful combat applicable early game hacks are things like overheat, which cause a bit of damage over time, and the damage optics hack, which can make it so the enemies are blind for a brief moment. However, by the time you get to the end of the game, and if you cared to seek out and spend the eddies on it, hacks can become borderline broken. You can get a legendary operating system or OS that is very expensive, but comes with a very robust amount of RAM and many useful quote-unquote ultimate level hacks. such as cyberpsychosis, which causes enemies to attack anyone around them, or my favorite hack called suicide, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. You simply cause an enemy to kill themselves. Granted, some enemies have such insane amounts of health that it won't even be enough to actually kill them, but instead it'll just do massive amounts of damage. And other enemies are immune to the effect altogether. But this is neither here nor there. At this point, it is feasible to kill just about any enemy by just looking at them, and not even having to draw your weapon. This can be done from cover as well, leading to some funny moments where enemies are confused as to what the hell just happened, and that's pretty good. That's one of the bright spots of the game. The OS gets even better than that as well, as it has a spreading effect on all ultimate level hacks. That means they spread to nearby enemies at least one time, making it even more viable and effective. It might be my favorite of the 3 combat elements, at least for the late game, so we're moving on. At this point, however, I'm struggling to come up with much else, aside from combat, a brief story breakdown, and a bunch of glitches. Sadly, that all weighs it down, and I'm already at the point where I just need to know why such a hype game let everybody down. Well, just like The Witcher, this wasn't a truly original idea by CDPR, and was in fact based on some guy named Mike Pondsmith's RPG called simply Cyberpunk, and he helped get this off the ground in 2012. The Polish government gave CDPR $7 million to assist with a project for whatever reason, which somebody would do that with me anyway, and they used it for extra staff members to make the game better. I wish it was all worth it though, but obviously we know it wasn't. But I really wish it was. Anyways, this game was so unreasonably hyped though before launch that at the time of release, it was actually the biggest digital game launch ever, sales-wise. It moved 10.2 million digital units on day 1. It still won 11 major gaming awards, mostly before it launched somehow, despite all of its flaws, which is nuts. The game that CDPR uses for this game was actually an upgraded, if you can believe it, version of the Witcher 3 engine, even though The Witcher was a better and far more polished experience. To end things off, I want to talk about the character his/herself, V. No, not this V, but rather this one. Upsetting, I know, but the character is only somewhat upsetting. I had some trouble projecting myself onto this protagonist for whatever reason. Usually, that's a simple task, especially for games who have silent protagonists. This game, though, I try to think that the dialogue chosen for V in any given situation is what I would probably say in the same situation, but I'd be lying to myself if I told myself that. And that's not as immersion breaking as some of the glitches of the game itself, obviously, but the only 2 real dialogue options you get in any situation is either to be a dick or be genuine. What if I want to be sarcastic or stoic? Most of the time, I just want to be funny, but V either takes things too seriously or is trying and failing to be funny. I'm not saying V is a bad character, but it just seems like he/she doesn't belong in this world. A character that is not just better than everybody else and is somehow still universally likable to all other characters in the game, but I'll also say that as powerful as V is, or rather is supposed to be, he/she seems to be made of tissue paper. I have the most fun when I'm playing a game like, say, Prototype or its sequel, where my character is powerful and all the obstacles that are faced in the game are either balanced or it seems like you could just feel the terror of the enemies as they deal with you. It's like the enemies themselves have to earn a victory against you, not the other way around. So while V feels offensively powerful most of the time, sadly the tissue paper skin breaks the illusion of power and I'm not into it. I thought maybe it was because I was using clothes that were fashion oriented and not defense oriented, but I finally got pissed and it finally got on my nerves enough to not only just wear the most high defensive clothes that I had, no matter how stupid they look, but it also didn't help at all, which is a problem. Even though I had the highest defensive clothes I could, it did nothing. And that's a problem. I upgraded this stuff and I put mods on it, but I was still made of tissue paper at the end of the day, so whatever. It's just the way it is, I guess. Anyways, let's see. I like how many free cars you can get in the game. I hate how you don't have a third person option. I like how you can't romance anyone. They actually have sexuality based on your voice and body type selected. I hate how they patched out exploits that would make the game more fun, like the item dupe glitch. Come on, why do you have to take things like that out? I like how you choose the ending based on whose side missions you completed. That's kind of cool. I hate, all the music that plays while driving. I like how you can choose to skip ride if you're not the one driving or if there's no relevant dialogue. I hate how you have to destroy the mods in order to remove them. I like how you can turn off the option for genitals if you wanted. I hate how if I don't do that and choose a male, I might have to see dick and balls. So you're telling me that there's more than one person in Night City who's riding around in solid gold, identical pimp mobiles? I hope they're subscribed. Alright, my chooms and choombas and gonk and other words that are just never gonna catch on. This game doesn't really have the sauce. It needed more time in the oven. They had the ambition, but not really the time. And they had the resources, but not really the time. And everything that they did have didn't really come together the way they wanted it to. That much I can promise you. Being a buggy, glitchy mess is never what you want a game to be, ever, let alone one as ambitious as this one, and one that had this sort of budget and this sort of backing. They got everybody in the world hyped for this game when it came out, and now nobody's playing it. Every time I picked this game up at this point, just to make the video, I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. And that's another reason why it took so long. Didn't want it to, my bad. Going through a lot of things in life, so that's why my uploads aren't very consistent. But it's not like a lot of you really care. So, that being said, I would probably want to give this game just, for all its efforts and all its trying, it kills me to do this, but I have to give it only a 2 out of 5. So, chooms, I'd like to thank you for staying so sexy on the line. You guys have a good one.